tertiary institutions, the issue of sexual harassment in the country has become a major concern in recent times, leading to unwanted pregnancies, right abuse, disease, infection, abortion, avoidable death, and all sorts of things. And then against this background, the commissioners for education from the 36 states and FCT will gather to engage the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission in Abuja to strategize on the best way to address the pervasive issue across all tertiary institutions in the country. The meeting, which is expected to focus on sexual harassment in tertiary institutions, is convened by the ICPC and Gender Mobile Initiative, a non-governmental organization. Now, Mrs. Omoumi, Executive Director, Gender Mobile Initiative, has said that the engagement will focus more on prevention frameworks rather than punitive measures. People have said that in Nigeria, I don't want to say we like now, but we usually have proactive measures. We take proactive measures rather than we take reactive measures rather than proactive measures. So let's get your thoughts on this sexual harassment, especially as it regards tertiary institutions.
So we're aware that sometime in this country, in 1984, if I'm correct, we had war against indiscipline. What that amounted to, we're still yet to see the results of that. You know, the further we go, into the century, it appears that on a global scale, this is becoming more and more the scenario. I don't think that this, forgive me, but I have to make that known, I don't think that this will yield any result. First, you have, addressing sexual harassment there's a biological base for it. I'm not in any way endorsing it, but I'm only saying my worry comes from the fact that, especially concerns one of the major issues, sex for mark, in our tertiary institutions. A lot of the students do not help to make this better. And I'm not saying this as a man. I'm saying this as someone who has had to speak up for a lot of my friends, before some of these very old fellows. Something happened while I was in Anambra recently. We're just walking on the road. I had a friend, she's a model. We're in our team, while walking, one of these men, very brash, irrational young men from the road, had to, tap her belly and all that. So I and the young man almost got into a brawl. Like, you don't do that to a woman. Regardless, even if she was naked, you still would require her consent to touch her. It's nobody's business and all that. So I was trying to let everyone around that space understand one thing. The idea of curtailing abuse is one that must be managed. First, let us understand, individuals have to understand their responsibility to themselves. It was bad enough what happened that day, but I am sure if my friend, the lady, had taken time to be well-dressed, forgive me, because you don't have members of the...
And the fact you said taking time.
Taking the time to,
to be well-dressed.
To be properly dressed.
Okay.
You don't have every single member of society. I mean, we're not all strong on the same basis out there. A lot of us out there in society do have this wretchedness in our character that we cannot manage our sexual urge and all that. And you do not go about to, one way or another, encouraging people indecent dressing and all that. So I'm glad that we've had institutions in this country that have taken the time to, tell people, giving out dress codes and guidelines. But very often, more often than not, you find students who are willing to find very smart ways of breaking these rules. Because why? You want to show up, you want to come out, especially let me use that word, in the Gen Z era. It appears to be, we millennials had our challenges, but now you see Gen Zs willing to actually go above and beyond to just show that they no longer care. So that's the society where we're having to face right now. And I do hope that members of the GMI, led by Omoumi, would critically understand. When we do call for stakeholder engagement like this, it's not enough to have members of the leadership of the ICPC. Let us go to the very basics of this. The people most affected, I do hope they will be called to the table. I do hope their ideas, their opinions will be heard. Because this looks like one of those, very high-powered delegations where, okay, yes, we have JMI. They'll go back and file a report. We had the engagement with the ICPC and all that. But the persons who get to suffer, who's coming on to tell their story of how sexual abuse has affected their education, their studies, and all that. Thankfully, you mentioned punitive measures. We've seen instances now in this country where some of, I would use the word, the lecturers have had to go in for that. But we've also seen more often than not, scenarios where a lot, especially when it comes to, I remember back in my time at the university, one of these issues came up and it became clear. The person you were taking before the ethics committee was virtually a friend to almost every one of the ethics board.
That is another problem that I also want to mention. But before I go on with that, we have the SCG president of the University of Port Harcourt. He has joined us, Martins Azarindo. Thank you so much, Martins, for joining us. We appreciate your coming despite all the odds flying down here. Thank you so much for coming. This particular story about sexual harassment, and the next question I was going to ask is definitely coming to you. How much do you think our schools are doing? I'm talking about tertiary institutions now. How much do you think they're doing to curb this particular menace of sexual harassment amongst lecturers and students?
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for having me. The topic of discourse is a very important one, and I'm somewhat interested in it because I just came back from Abuja 2 weeks ago for a program organized by Alliance for Africa. And why did we go? To look at the issue of sexual harassment in Nigerian universities, and student union leaders, SUG presidents of about 12 institutions across the country were invited. Were invited to discuss, and a whole lot of issues were dealt with as it concerns sexual harassment. It's a very sad one that students are being harassed by lecturers for grades and what have you, and the lecturers claim that the way some of our students are dressed, it's the reason.
The lecturers really claim that?
Yes,
that's the way the students are dressed?
I'm telling you authoritatively, I'm speaking authoritatively, I'm not doing a guesswork. In course of that particular seminar, that particular conference, we were interrupting, and the organizers told us that before the students union leaders came on board, that they actually had a session with ASU. Okay? And while they were talking, they made mention of that as an aspect, and which to me is inconsequential. And they also came up with another idea. And what is that idea? That it is the students that actually force themselves on lecturers because our students no longer read. These and other reasons they brought to me, which I feel it's highly irrelevant. What's the cause of the matter? How do we deal with this particular matter in question? For some of us, we've made it a task to fight sexual harassment on our different campuses, and we're dead serious about it. And how do we intend to go about this? One, we intend to, in the ethics committee of some universities, we have purely lecturers, and right now we are going to insist that students, in particular student union leaders, should be included in the ethics committee of every institution. The students should be there.
Why do we have only lecturers in that particular committee?
That's what we have, and that's what we need to fight for. Because though sexual harassment happens, but in rare cases among students, you can see a student to student, it does, but it's about 2% of the 100% experience we may have had. So 98 plus happens between lecturers and students, and in most cases it is students that are being affected. So if students are being affected and students have representatives in the name of their student union leaders, then I think that the student union leaders should be included into the ethics committee. You cannot be the judge of your own case. You can't have a situation where a lecturer harasses a student and the set of persons that will be coming to look into the matter are still lecturers. 1,000 times no for me. So I think that we should be included in the ethics committee. And for us, for me, I intend in the next 1 week or thereabout, I am going to form a committee on sexual harassment, put a chairperson there, and how do we now sustain it? Will it just happen in my time and leave? No. So we are going to have Mr. just as we do pageantry and we have Mr. and Mrs. SUG. We will now have Mr. Anti-Sexual Harassment and Miss Anti-Sexual Harassment, okay, agent for the student's body. The intention is with you holding this, but you know, when you give people offices, they now have this sense of responsibility. They know that they are committed to a task. They have something to catch up with. So when I do this, or when we set up this particular platform to have Mr. and Miss Anti-Sexual Harassment for the students' union body, it will help them to find out. You can now talk to our students. When you have these cases, please do not keep it to yourself.
Did the students really talk? Did they speak up? You know, Stephen just mentioned something that made me come to you immediately to ask you this question. Sometimes you have cases of these lecturers who are harassing these female students. They have a certain position in the school. So it is quite difficult for the female students to call out that person. So they have thoughts of, who is going to believe me? How do I report somebody with this kind of position in the hierarchy of this school? How do I bring out, I'm talking because I just spoke to someone recently, a few weeks ago, who is actually going through this particular issue. And she told me that this man is like the second in command in the university. So because I spoke to her about reporting the case. Okay, when next you go into his office, at least record it. She said, no, when I come to his office, he tells me to put my phone on the table. So I cannot even silently or secretly record anything. So I was having this conversation with her, and I realized that some female students, because of the position of this lecturer, might not want to speak up. That's why I asked, how much is the school doing? When she finally speaks up, if that is really the case, how much will the school, how much are our schools really doing to investigate, to make sure that they bring the perpetrator to book? That's actually what I want to know.
Responding to that, I think the students need to sit up now. We ought not to depend on the school. Okay, the school
that means you're indirectly saying the school is not doing so much or doing enough.
Even though they are doing anything,
okay.
Let's assume they are doing anything or they've been doing something before now. We are not seeing any results. Okay, the act is on the increase. So that's why we need to go into seminars and orientations. Call our students, give them hope, tell them we are solidly behind them. Just report to us. Just report to us. That's just what we want. No matter how highly placed that lecturer think he is, be he or her or whatsoever you think, a professor or whatsoever, we don't care. All we just want is report the case to us. There are organizations out there like Alliance for Africa, okay, we can report to, that have international contacts, that have contacts to government, that can bring in lawyers. They have people who are even ready to investigate. All we just need is reports to us. These students are not going to report because they feel that if they report, they are going to be exposed, talked down on, and then
their grades, they are going to be very important
by lecturers. Okay, so we coming in as a body, okay, with the help of other organizations who have made themselves available as agents to fight this particular menace in the society. When we come together and these people are seeing that there is an organization that is so powerful to contend,
there will be a reduction in that.
You will see
all right.
Drastic eradication.
Stephen, just like Martin stated when he started his analysis, he talked about some lecturers saying that the students are not properly dressed, and that's probably one of the issues that we have concerning sexual harassment in our tertiary institutions. And it brought me back to what you said during your analysis when you said some ladies or some female students or some of the students do not really dress properly. That's in line with what the lecturers have said. So how do you think we can solve this particular problem? We cannot outrightly rule it, like completely take it away from the equation.
Okay, so I've had this worry that, you know, coming up from being in Nigeria, we've always had a very moral society, but lately you can see that declining. It appears as though as years go by, morality is on the decline. This the very reason why I did cite the need, when we had the war against indiscipline, we've not seen that. I do remember under the Odeli administration here, even as a younger child, as a very young child then, there was this project or program by Justice Mary Odili at the time, we heard in Port Harcourt, where, females or ladies who were not so properly dressed were being embarrassed. but that we've had all of this. We need to remember that we are a very moral society. We also need to remind ourselves that I still believe that there are strong moral values we all got from the family, at the family level. But intentionally, somehow, when I hear people quote, train up a child in the way you should go and you should not go. I debated that with the pastor sometime. I told them at some point, I'm realizing that people do have choice to make. You may have had all of that training, but you come into a phase where the university environment, where you feel, oh, you do have a certain level of liberty or freedom at this point. So people want to, especially young people, want to explore, do other things. We lack in us the strength of character to stay true to those ideals we may have been taught. So it is just me praying somehow that a lot of us will remind ourselves that we are a very moral society. And we should not play down on that.
The problem stated about students not studying anymore and female students throwing themselves at lecturers for grades, how do we solve that problem? Do you even see that as one of the reasons yourself now?
For me, there is no reason that is reasonable enough to do something that is not right. Any reason you're given to indulge
is an excuse,
an attitude,
yes,
that is not accepted by law or acceptable by law should be jettisoned. We shouldn't even talk about it. Like the one my brother and friend Steve just pointed out. So what if you travel to the Western world, you visit places like the United States of America, you visit places like the United Kingdom? What are you going to say to the ladies? You ask them to dress properly? Are you going to ask the young girl there to dress properly? So it is now on you to discipline yourself.
Yes, sir.
It is now on you to discipline yourself. Your reason should not be. Another person's action should not be the reason why you should go into crime. This is crime for crying out loud. Sexual harassment is a crime for crying out loud, so far as I'm concerned. So that she's well dressed or not should not. Can't you remove your eyes and walk? You should.
Of course you should, because it's, aside the fact that it's against the law, it is not morally right. The society frowns at it. And then the effect, the ripple effect they usually have on the students is also a big reason why you should not indulge in that.